Hi, I'm Suze Moore and this is my dog Minnie, and today I thought we would celebrate Earth Day by being outside on this beautiful English sunny day in the woods. And today we are going to continue with Crimson Poison and the adventures of Nat Walker and her robot dragon Fizz. We left them in chapter 32 on a boat in Borneo with Nat's best friend Wen, and they're off to try and track down Dr. Fred Fairlight. And today we're going to begin with chapter 33, Tricky Business. He examined the diagram one more time, double-checking the incision point before pulling the scalpel carefully out of its pouch. The fine silver blade glinted in the overhead light. Taking a deep breath, he put his good eye to the microscope. A droplet of sweat fell onto the eyepiece. He wiped it away with his sleeve and tried again. This time, the petal came into sharp focus, blood red and electric blue like a neon strip. He brought the scalpel under the microscope and positioned it so that the tip of the blade was at the top where the blue and red met. His hand trembled and he nearly scored the petal. This was harder than he thought. All the bravado he had mustered to report to the Berserker General about his progress had vanished the moment he left the tent. He took another deep breath and exhaled slowly before repositioning the blade. The veins in the petal were easily visible. All he had to do was draw a line with the scalpel between the major third and fourth ones, making sure he only severed a maximum of 8 of the spider veins which ran between them on the petal. The blade sliced through 2 spider veins. He continued to cut, trying to trace the others, but it was useless. "Agree," he said, watching the petal begin to curl, the beautiful red and blue fading to brown. The petal folded in on itself, withering before his eyes. His priceless weapon had once again turned into dust. Come on, Minnie. Minnie's off on an adventure. There we go. 34. Ooh, Trouble on the River. Nat woke to the rattle of machine gun fire on the television. Daylight filtered through the net curtain. She felt stiff and cold from the icy air conditioning. "Fizz, where are you?" she said, her teeth chattering. "Window recharging," came his robotic voice from behind the curtain. She reached underneath and picked him up off the ledge. "Messages?" "One from Henry." "Show me." Fizz opened his wings. Henry appeared on screen. He was in his bedroom, still in his pajamas. "Hi, Nat. Did you get to Borneo? Mummy just came in and told me to put on my suit. We're going to her lawyers about you. I'll try to record you. Record it. I miss you. Bye," he said. Nat swallowed hard. The guardianship. Aunt Vera was really going to fight for it. She closed her eyes, wishing for Jamuka to come back safe and sound. She stepped over Wen, who was sound asleep under a sarong, and headed for the deck. It was like climbing out of a freezer and into an oven. Ikat waved from the helm. Nat smiled, waving back. The air was filled with the roar of the engines, propelling the boat up the muddy river at high speed. On either side, dense jungle gave off a rich, musky odour. Nat grabbed onto the side rail to keep her balance. The sun shone down from a clear sky. Happiness unexpectedly bubbled up inside her. It was good to be on deck again. Looking upriver, she saw a big tree trunk floating towards them. She braced herself for the bump, but the boat's steel nose just pushed it out of the way. "Logging camps," shouted Ikat. "Dump trees in river. Free transport." Nat smiled. As the sun reached higher, the river began to narrow. Ikat slowed the engines. Birdsong and buzzing insects replaced the engine roar. Nat ate the rest of the coconut rice Pager had given to her. She kicked off her shoes and dangled her feet over the side of the boat. Cool water splashed up her legs as she gazed out at the rainforest. Soaring trees with leaves as big as plates reached out across the water. But a sudden yell in the distance broke the calm, followed by a chorus of angry shouts. The pointed nose of a canoe came racing round the bend up ahead. Someone was paddling towards them at a furious pace. Nat shaded her eyes and squinted against the sunlight bouncing off the water. A figure dressed in khaki, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, was sitting in the front of the canoe with a stack of crates, weighing it dangerously low in the water. Ikat cut the boat's engines. She saw another canoe coming round the bend in hot pursuit of the other one. Two men wearing bandanas round their heads, black vests and camouflage trousers, were paddling at a clip. Nat gasped. One of them stood up and waved a machete in the air, its blade glinting menacingly in the sun. "Pirates, go inside," said Ikat, opening the hatch as Pager ran across the roof with a metal anchor on a rope. Nat sprang down the steps. The hatch slammed shut behind her. "Hi, Wen," said Nat. "I just got a message about those ding Mito jeans." Nat grabbed Wen's arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Pirates! Outside! They've got a machete!" Wen laughed. "Ha! You've been watching too much bad TV." Nat leaned across to pull back the curtain. "Real pirates, Wen! Look!" They peered through the grubby window. The pirates were nearly at their boat. There was a loud thud. Shouts erupted like gunfire. Wen's hand flew to her mouth. "Ay-ya! They're chasing another canoe full of crates," said Nat. There was another thud on the roof, followed by heavy footsteps. The pirate with the machete was now waving it from side to side. Wen shrieked as an anchor came flying across the water, knocking the pirate off his feet. "Zoinks!" said Nat. "One down." The other pirate lunged towards the boat, leaping on board. The first pirate's hand slapped against Nat and Wen's window as he pulled himself up out of the river. "No!" cried Wen. "They're coming on board!" More heavy thuds hit the roof. An ear-piercing scream sounded out, and Fizzer's eyes lit up bright red. Thick smoke came billowing out of his snout. Fu started thumping her feet in alarm. "Stop!" said Wen, clamping her hand over Fu's rabbit mouth. "You'll give us away!" Pager's face flew past the window. He splashed into the river. "Oh no, that leaves Ikat against two pirates," said Nat, her mind spinning. "There's only one thing for it. We're going to have to take action." "We can hide under our seats," said Wen. "But they'll find us. I mean real action," said Nat, her eyes scanning the cabin. Wen frowned. "What? You mean real action, gun-fu stuff, just like Scowler Stone?" Nat nodded, jumping into the gangway and making her way to the front. "Are you mad? They're big. We're kids. And this is real. It's not the movies." Nat reached over and picked up a cage. The cockerels inside began squawking. Fizz blew smoke at them, making them squawk even more. "Stop, Fizz. We can use these," said Nat, holding the cage up. Wen screwed up her face. "You think you're going..." Oh, sorry, just let me get the dog back. Oh, sorry, wriggling. "You think you're going to beat 2 pirates armed with machetes with 2 cockerels? They'll chop them up and have them for supper." Nat ignored her, ran over to another seat, dragged a heavy box onto the floor and pushed it up towards the hatch. "And for your next trick?" said Wen. Nat opened the box. "No way," said Wen. "If we don't do anything, the pirates will get us, and I hate to think that what they might do with us, so take your pick." Nat pointed inside the box with one hand and held out the cage in the other. Wen took the cage. "Right, this is my plan," said Nat. Chapter 35. Fred. 2 minutes later, Nat undid the bolt and yanked open the hatch. Outside in the cockpit, Ikat was engaged in a fierce battle with one of the pirates, using a metal pole to fend off the thrusts of the machete. 1, 2, 3, whispered Nat. The pirates spun round just as Nat and Wen jumped up, each holding a cockerel. They hurled the cockerels at the pirate. The birds opened their wings in fright, hitting him squarely in the face. "Ag!" he cried, dropping the machete. Wasting no time, Ikat hit him hard with the pole. The pirate fell to the ground, out cold, and 2 bewildered cockerels landed on top of him. "Ding!" shouted Wen, punching the air. Nat spun round to see the other pirate up on the roof. He was wrestling with the giant canoeist who was clutching a crate. Nat jumped up. "Here," said Wen, passing her the box. Nat set it down on the roof and reached in for a spiky durian fruit about the size of a football. She aimed at the pirate and threw it as hard as she could. He saw it and ducked, but Nat had already picked up a smaller one. This time the fruit hit his arm, exploding on contact. The pirate roared, let go of the crate, and charged at Nat. The 3rd durian fruit hit him on the shoulder, but it didn't stop him. Nat crouched down. This was for real. This wasn't just another sparring session with Jamuka. As the pirate launched himself at her, she rolled to one side, leapt up and kicked him as hard as she could in the stomach. With a loud grunt, the pirate lost his footing and went flying off the roof into the river below. "Bravo, young lady!" sang the giant canoeist. Nat gasped. "You're a woman!" Ikat revved the boat's engines. He thrust them into reverse, getting as much distance between them and the pirate in the water as possible. Nat flew backwards, landing in the cockpit on a sopping wet pager, who had managed to clamber back on board. "You are one kung fu jade babe. Ken would be proud," said Wen, giving her a hand up. "Good work," shouted Ikat with a grin. Nat smiled with relief. Her heart was hammering in her chest. It had been a close call. "Arrest that man!" sang the enormous woman, hitting a top note. "Woo!" She was standing on the roof, looking down into the cockpit, clutching her crate and pointing at the other pirate, who Pager had bound and gagged. "You snivelling orchid thief! He nearly got his hands on my Semper Lucidius." "Dr. Fairlight," said Ikat, nodding. "Trouble again?" You're Dr. Fairlight," said Nat, taking in the bright red cheeks with shaggy mop of grey hair and a pair of thick pebble glasses perched on the end of a big, knobbly nose. Fred clambered off the roof. She towered over them like a big bear. "Indeed I am. Very good to meet you," she said, pumping Nat's hand up and down. "Just call me Fred, please." "I'm Natalie Walker, and this is my friend, Wen Tang." "I'm Dr. Tang's daughter," said Wen. Fred's bushy eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Amazing! How is your mother?" "Very well. She sent us to find you." Fred lifted the top off the crate and produced a tall, spindly green plant with several jet black flowers. "This is the most splendid specimen of Semper Lucidius known to exist. Most exciting. I had to climb to the top of a tree to get it." She lifted it up to the sky. "Up to the top, up, 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 up," she sang, scaling an octave. Nat glanced over at Wen. Wen winked. "Mad as a snake." "Dr. Fairlight, we go Kuching," said ECAT. "Kuching? Goodness me, no. I must get back to my camp." "Drop me off downriver in Nangagut Longhouse, please. But take that rascal," she pointed to the pirate, "to the police station in Kuching. I'll give you a written note for the police commissioner." "No," said Nat. "Please, you must come to Kuching. Like Wen said, Dr. Tang told us to come and find you. You're the only one who can help save the clan." Fred looked up and blinked. "Save the clan?" "In Mongolia," said Wen. "Tumen Vachir," said Nat. "Have you ever heard of Marbolic?" Fred let out a large, loud snort. "Course I know about Marbolic. It's a terrible poison, made from a fertilizer called Grow-em-up. I told them before they had completed trials that the product was going to start an environmental disaster. Is that what's happened?" Between them, Nat and Wen told Fred everything they knew, while ECAT drove the boat downriver. "Nangagut Longhouse," he announced, pulling into a low wooden dock on a far bank. Fred picked up her crate. "What a right old mess you found yourselves in. I suggest you call the Mongolian army. It's their job to clean up this sort of thing." "But Mum said if anyone could find the antidote, it's you," said Wen. Fred nodded. "The problem is I'm extremely busy with my orchid studies. I'm on a very tight deadline to hand in my paper, and I've still got major experiments to conduct." "You've got to help save the clan. Without an antidote, they'll die," said Nat, no longer caring if she sounded panicked. "Please." Pager jumped on the dock with the mooring rope. "Quite impossible," said Fred, packing away the orchid. "I'll lose all my funding if I don't complete my studies. As I said, try the army. They should be able to find out who's using Grow-em-up and put a stop to it. Now, if you'll excuse me." She stepped out onto the dock. "How much funding will you get?" said Wen. $100,000, said Fred. "We'll double it," said Wen. "Triple it." Fred turned and blinked. "Look, girls, you couldn't possibly come up with such a princely sum." "Have you heard of Spin?" said Nat. "Who?" said Fred. "The Walker Games Company," said ECAT, cutting the engines. Nat nodded. Wen held up 3 fingers. "Empire of the Shadow, Wand of Truth, and Levanta. Come on, you must have heard of Spin's top 3 world #1 games." Fred snorted. "Oh, Well, that's bounty indeed, but your parents might not want to part with their hard-earned cash. Nat bit her lip. They're dead. She's an orphan, said Wen. Fred peered at Nat. Her head cocked to one side. You're serious about this, aren't you? Very, said Nat. They stood in silence for a moment, the squawks and hum of the jungle closing in. Well, Miss Walker. Fred's mouth opened into a strange, lopsided smile, as if she was sucking a toffee. She headed back towards the boat. Well, what are we waiting for? Good girl, Minnie. Oh, Minnie's on the wriggle. I'm just going to have to pop her on the... Can we just put you on your lead for the last chapter? Otherwise, I fear she might be headed off into the local jungle here. Hang on one sec. Good girl. Good girl. There we go. Good girl. Oops. Okay. Chapter 36. Custody. The Walkers were sitting in the kitchen, slurping crab and noodle soup for supper. Prissy was in a sulk. She stirred her spoon noisily, while across the table Henry stared into his bowl, his food untouched. He glanced anxiously at Nut-Nut. His squirrel hadn't made a sound since he'd sent Nat the video, and that was over 3 hours ago. Prissy, stop that, snapped Aunt Vera, reaching across and snatching away Prissy's spoon. It tastes disgusting, said Prissy. Go to your room. Aunt Vera pointed towards the door. Prissy scraped her chair back slowly on the marble floor. Everyone winced. She grabbed her glitter cat robot off the table and clacked out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Silence fell. Uncle Fergal picked up his crystal tumbler and took a big swig of his whiskey. Got ourselves a real teenager, haven't we? Vera pursed her lips. I said she couldn't have Candy over for a sleepover. The brat is back tomorrow. Henry squeezed Nut-Nut's right ear to trigger his recording function. Nut-Nut's ears twitched. Uncle Fergal nodded. Did the papers arrive from the lawyer? Vera turned and picked up a large brown envelope from the shelf behind her. A sly smile spread across her lips. You'll never have to work again. She wafted the envelope tantalizingly beneath his nose. Henry felt sick as he watched his father pull out a thick sheet of typed white papers from the envelope. I have to hand it to you, Vera. You've pulled a rabbit out of a hat, he said, flicking through them. It wasn't easy. The only loophole we could find was to file for abandonment by guardian. Our Wong has acted as witness to say that Jamuka abandoned Natalie without due care. It cost a bit. She's a smart woman, and she asked for a lot of money. I've told her I'll pay her when we get guardianship and access to the spin fortune. I see it as a worthwhile expense. And when do we get custody? Said Fergal. Well, Jamuka isn't here to fight our claim. Since we're claiming its abandonment, we only have to legally wait a week. Vera clapped her hands together. We're going to be richer than we ever dreamed of. And the brat? I've already spoken with the estate agent and briefed him to find us a house up on the peak. It must have a wing where she can be kept separately with an adjoining nanny's room. Uncle Fergal nodded in agreement. Very wise, Vera. We don't want her becoming really a part of the family now, do we? Henry felt like punching his dad. How could he and his mum be so greedy and horrible? Instead, he bit his tongue and looked down at his bowl. He coughed loudly and made a spluttering sound. "Not feeling too bright, eh, Henry?" said his dad. Henry slumped his shoulders and shook his head. "We better get the boy to bed, Vera. He's not touched his supper." "Go to bed, Henry, darling. We need you back on your feet to go house hunting tomorrow, bright and early." Henry stood up from the chair and walked limply towards the door, leaving Nut-Nut on the table, still cleverly recording. "Darling, have you forgotten your manners?" called out Aunt Vera. He looked up to see her pointing at her cheek, and he felt as if he were kissing a poisonous snake. And that's the end of chapter 36. Thank you so much for joining myself and Minnie, and I hope you've enjoyed this, and look after yourselves, keep well, and I shall hopefully see you again soon for chapter 37 of Crimson Poison. Thank you and bye-bye.